So as mentioned, I am a retired Army Sergeant Major. My last job in uniform was with the Army Cyber Institute, and these days I work at Liberty Mutual Insurance as a cyber risk engineer. I'm sure you're thinking, what on earth is a cyber risk engineer? I've never heard of this job. Don't worry, neither did I until I started doing it. Essentially, I am one of the people who helps out underwriters to understand when they are underwriting cyber insurance policies, help them understand some of the nuances of the risks that they are looking at. And so working for a large multinational organization, naturally, I have the obligatory legal disclaimer. Short version, nothing I say or don't say constitutes a service, so you cannot hold me responsible for anything I recommend or fail to recommend. Cool? All right. So, as I was coming on board this job, I'm reading various reports by organizations that do reporting in the cyber insurance space, because of course there's organizations that do reporting in the cyber insurance space. And I'm looking at this one in particular, because my boss is a data scientist, and he's like, hey, Gallagher Re has amazing data scientists. You should go read some of their reports. And so I'm reading this report in particular, and I stumble across this phrase. And here you can see it in context. And the part that I really want to point out is not super amazingly highlighted here, but it's this part here, this phrase, but cyber being a social science at its core will always lack the same access to quantitative data that is available to natural perils, blah, blah, blah. And I'm reading this going, wait, what? Since when did we just agree that cyber is a social science? Because, I, for one, again, my last job was at the Army Cyber Institute, which if you're not familiar with, is at this small public college on the Hudson River that you may be slightly familiar with. And I very much remember the cyber program there being under the Department of Electrical Engineering and Computer Science, not any of the social sciences departments. So I'm like, what are you talking about, people? Now, understanding, specifically here, they're talking about the idea that we don't have a lot of really good quantitative data in the cyber field. Like, yes, we generate tons of data. Sensors will generate data by the terabyte. Data is a thing we have, but we don't have really good trend data over time of explicit things like temperature and wind speed, the way we do for natural perils. And so we're not able to do that same sort of trend analysis over time and to be able to come up with conclusions like climate change is a thing. We don't have that same sort of data in the cybersecurity world. Which really gets to the question also, what is cyber anyway? If any of y'all were in the opening portion of today's events, you noticed Admiral White saying, no one really knows what cyber is. It's an adjective, it's a verb, it's a noun, mostly it's a cuss word. And okay, not wrong. But it might be useful to construct as, all right, so if cyber usually falls under computer science, how is cyber a distinct field, a distinct degree program from computer science or information technology? Right? And so the way I think about it is computer science is really like, how do we make computers work? I mean, electrical engineering handles, the electrical signaling bit, but then, we go up a layer and we talk computer science, and that is the algorithms, the programming, all of those sorts of parts of how a computer works. And then you go up another layer and you have IT, which in my mind, again, this is not in any way, shape, or form an academic definition. IT is much more, how do we make those computers work for businesses? How do we make them usable by people? How do they fit into organizations' operations? So what what about cyber in all of that? So it's worth noting that cyber frequently comes along with the word security. So let's look at that word security, and yes, this is very small, sorry about that. But an important thing here is that security has, as part of its definition, the idea of safety. And while security and safety in English are two different words, in some other languages they are in fact the same word. And so these concepts of security and safety are tied together. We'll also notice that in the definition of security is measures taken to guard against espionage or sabotage, crime, attack, or escape. And so, okay, that feels a lot more like the definition that we usually think of as cybersecurity. It's corporate security. It's making sure that intellectual property is safe. It's making sure that your payment card information does not fall into the wrong hands, things like that. But again, there's that idea of safety that is tied up in security. And here we get much more into the human side of things rather than the corporate side. The idea of being safe from undergoing or causing hurt, injury, or loss. We don't usually think of corporations as being hurt. We usually think of that as a word that applies to people. And we also have the idea of protecting against failure, protecting against breakage or accident. And while failure certainly is a thing that we think about in terms of organizations, things like breakage and accident, like those are things that are very visceral to us as humans, hopefully. So regardless of whether we are thinking about this cyber thing in terms of security or safety, how do we work towards those goals? And something that I have come to in dealing with both IT and cybersecurity for upwards of 20 years is that at the end of the day, it is risk management all the way down. And when you look at organizational risk management, when we're talking about strategic risk, we're talking that big picture stuff that risk managers deal with. They're looking at things like growth, culture, information management pressures, and they compartment that idea of strategic risk into things like operations risk, asset impairment risk, competitive risk, franchise risk. In one of the talks earlier today, I know someone was talking about reputational risk because brand means a lot. As organizations that are very interested in recruitment, your brand matters in who you manage to hire into your organizations. And so that is really huge, but you'll notice nowhere in those big corporate definitions of risk is this specific thing called cyber risk, because it's not a thing that corporations care about. Like, yes, cyber risk is a thing that can get in the way of any of those other things, but at the end of the day, for corporations, for most organizations, what they are concerned about is their business operations, their ability to accomplish their mission. So at the end of the day, it's not about tech. Tech does not matter. What matters is the ability of tech to enable or disable, when it goes wrong, normal business operations. It is about the ability of organizations to meet their business goals, whatever those goals are. So when we talk about meeting business goals, a really important concept is desire paths. Anyone familiar with the idea of desire paths? Got a couple of head nods. So a desire path is the idea that, look, at the end of the day, people are going to do what people are going to do. In this particular picture here, yoinked from the applicable Wikipedia page because, you know, it's an image that I'm legally allowed to use, you have a very obvious sidewalk, but the sidewalk is not the shortest point between two lines. And because there is no fence there, a very clear path has been worn between 2 points on the sidewalk. We also have a rental scooter just left in the middle of the picture because, again, people are going to do what people are going to do. So the big idea here is to understand that, like, yeah, you could put guardrails on this. You could put a fence along there, and fewer people would cut across that corner. But is it better to tell people no? Or is it better to have engineered that to meet what people want to do in the first place? So are you familiar with the idea of shadow IT? Hopefully that's pretty much everyone in the room. You know, it's the idea that if you do not provide people a means of accomplishing their job that meets with their expectations of how difficult their job should be, they are going to find a way around you. If you block certain websites, they're going to start connecting their computers to, you know, hotspot on their phone, if they are physically capable of doing that. And so you have to understand what are the things that people need to accomplish their missions. And you need to enable them to do that, because otherwise they're going to go around you, and that is when you have a really bad day. So this requires getting into the head of, if you're on the defensive side of the world, your users. If you're on the offensive side of the world, your targets. You have to understand, what is their job? How does tech support it? How does tech get in their way? What are the things that they're going to notice? What are the things that they're not going to notice? What are the things that can slide under the radar versus what are the things that are going to have a really big effect? And that is a fascinating way of thinking about things, because as you start going down that rabbit hole, you also think about the headspace of threat actors. We can argue all day long about the importance of attribution, but what is really useful to every organization is to understand what is of value to your average threat actor and how hard are they willing to work at it. Essentially, it's that don't be the low-hanging fruit thing, right? So you've got a whole lot of understanding of people and human behavior that has to happen in order to be a competent cyber professional, which sounds a lot like anthropology, which is absolutely not a computer science. So when you are doing that, when you are trying to understand your users, when you're trying to support your users, hopefully at some point you are going to be introducing them new features, new capabilities. You might be offering new protections, you know, less exciting for the users, but you're going to want to test those out. And the common method of doing that is A/B testing. We are familiar with the concept of A/B testing, right? Excellent. So when does it go from an A/B test to a research project? If you were going to conduct a formal research project and you did the things that you want to do on your A/B test, if you were in an environment where you had to do the actual like IRB process, what would the IRB say about your testing process? Because I know a lot of A/B testing would be considered kind of unethical if you actually went through normal research channels. So understand that. Understand what are the things that you might be doing that cause a lot of stress on your users. Things like changing around the user interface and the person next to them has a different user interface. Like, please don't gaslight your users. Do not recommend. Because I have known a lot of people that have gotten very stressed out because everything changed and they're the only person that sees it. If you're going to test something, They're your users. They're the people you have a job for. Please communicate with them. And this gets even more important if you are on the red team, if you are the person designing phishing emails to be sent out to your users. Because yes, threat actors do not have the ethical framework and the ethical considerations that you do. But again, do not unnecessarily stress out your users. Highly recommend the talk that is linked there from Roy Iverson and Tara Wheeler from HammerCon from a couple of years ago, talking about the ethics of being on a red team. Because yes, I have seen real-world phishing emails that scared the crap out of people. I have seen someone who got a phishing email that claimed to be from her dead husband. So if you are operating entirely as a technical person, how do you have the social skills to handle that situation? So here I am dealing with an exceedingly freaked out user trying to understand why someone is claiming to be her dead husband. You do not need to inflict that sort of stress on your users for the purposes of teaching them to recognize phishing emails. No, please do not. Please respect your users more than that. There is a very famous paper from Salzer and Schrader, The Protection of Information in Computer Systems. Again, obligatory link on the screen. And it lists a whole bunch of design principles. And one of them is psychological acceptability. You can read the definition there on the screen, but this goes back to the idea of desire paths, that people need to understand why you are making them do what you're making them do. They need to have a mental model of whatever it is, whatever the system is that they're using, that matches reality close enough. Because if their idea of how a system should work and how the system actually works are very different things, you're going to have users that hate life and thus hate you. And the really fascinating thing when I was reading this paper is, it covers a lot of things that we don't talk about nearly enough in the field, and they seem like, really super modern research aspects. Anyone know offhand when this paper's from? Oh no, keep going, keep going.
I've read this paper, but yes. I don't even remember how old it is. I read this in college.
Right. 70s? 1975. This paper is older than a good chunk of people in this room. So this is not a new concept. This is not some newfangled, lovey-dovey, soft, new Gen Z stuff. Like, every generation has problems, okay? But, we all stereotype that kids these days, yada, yada. But the idea that users' concerns matter is not new. And so this is something that we really need to internalize as security professionals. Because at the end of the day, we are the experts in the room. Our users are not. They're the experts at whatever their job is. And so this brings me to a point that is important enough that I put it in the fanciest lettering that my current skills will allow. It is the idea that our job as security professionals is to make doing the right thing easy. That it is our job to engineer a path of least resistance that is good. If in order to have good, we have to send our users through a highly skilled obstacle course that an Olympic gymnast would have problems with, we are not engineering a good solution. We need to make it easy for our users to do what is right. So, all right, let us say you have internalized this concept. how do you operationalize that? How do you use this idea? And so within my organization, I do a lot of risk assessments of organizations. And so the model that we use is called the Liberty lenses. And the idea is that there are 4 lenses that we look through in order to assess an organization. Threat access, organizational culture, security operations and resilience, planning and engineering, partner security. I will note they're roughly in priority order, which means that organizational culture falls right after the how do threat actors get into people's networks. Like, it is that important to us. It's things like, do you have a senior security leader? Are they empowered? What is their budget? What are they spending it on? Are they focusing on buying stuff, or are they focusing on upskilling their security workforce? Does it seem like they hire people who get it? Who's filling out the questionnaire? What sort of language do they use? Again, as someone who has done both IT and cybersecurity, I can definitely tell the language that they're using on those questionnaires. And so, those are the things that I look at when I'm assessing the overall security of an organization. If you want to convince me that you're a secure organization, one of the best things you can do is to demonstrate that you have a mature security culture. So, in spite of me initially reading that statement of, yes, of course, cyber is a social science, I came to the conclusion that, I will agree with that. Cyber is a social science. It is much more involved in the affairs of people than technology. This is not to downplay the importance of technology, but at the end of the day, it's about making it work for people. And it is really hard to solve sociological problems with just technological solutions. We cannot technology our way out of how people act around each other. And again, my personal favorite phrase, make doing the right thing easy. Contact deets are up there. If we have time for questions, I'm happy to take them, but I do request that questions be in the form of a question. Yes?
Do you have any positive examples of changes that were made to make things easier?
Positive examples of changes made to make things easier. I mean, one of the huge ones really is just, and it was very much forced by COVID, just the ability of a lot of organizations to be able to accept remote work a lot more easily. And that really opened things up to people who have all sorts of family situations, disabilities, and so you actually expand the workforce by doing that. And also that just gives people the flexibility to take care of work and home life a lot better. And so by understanding actual zero trust principles, like not as a product, but as an actual architectural methodology, being able to implement some of those things absolutely made people's lives easier. And they still got work done, if not getting it done better, because they get to take care of both work and home a lot easier than they would otherwise. Understanding there are legitimate reasons, like classified facilities, why that doesn't work for everyone, but that would be a huge example of just making it easy. Any other questions? All right, thank you very much for sticking around towards the end.